email forward. But a friend decided she wanted to go fishing, and we tried it, and we were there drowning worms, but fish weren't having any. It's been a while since I fished in this pond before, so I'm not sure if there's still anything left in it or not. So to go along with this HDMI presentation, what I also was doing since last meeting, I had to deal with the fact that our preschool director at church wanted to have her own monitor that showed her the security cameras, because now with the increased visibility of schools and preschools and such, we want to know who's coming at the doors and so on and so forth. So we have a network NVR that's hooked up, but the monitor is physically located in the room across the hall from her. So she wanted her own monitor, and I said, well, until I can run an HDMI cable, I'm going to have to do something more exotic. I just grabbed one of their old laptops and fired up the web browser version of it, and have had that on her desk for about the last 2 weeks, and it's run without a hitch. Keep on displaying the video. You haven't even had to restart it. As long as it's left plugged in and running all the time, it's happy.
Well,
it runs with Internet Explorer as a requirement.
What?
Yeah, still uses an Internet Explorer function to be able to launch. You can't launch it with, you start it with Chrome, it goes to Internet Explorer to display.
Offhand, what are you going to do when they actually eliminate Internet Explorer in Windows?
Going to be a little hard because this is running on a Windows 7 laptop.
Wow.
But it's an old laptop, and as long as it's got enough memory and it displays it, that's worked for now. But my goal was to go and get an HDMI splitter, which I did do. I verified I could use an HDMI splitter to split the video that was coming out of the box on the wall. And I drove both the monitor in the office and a 32-inch Panasonic TV driven through the HDMI port, and both of them had copies of the same stuff. So I said, it's working. So I said, oh, I'm going to need about a 30, what's the longest HDMI cable I can get? 30 feet. And that's pushing it. So I ordered my 30-foot cable, and then I started lifting up some of the ceiling tiles to look at where I'd have to run this thing. Unfortunately, there's about 12 to 15 inches of steel girder in the way with no holes in it. And I wasn't going to drill through that. And when I found the other holes that the fire alarm wires went through in another office that was close to the point, they drilled through at least 8 to 12 inches of concrete block and mortar. So I said, that's not going to be an option either, because I don't have a 12-inch long hammer drill that's going to drill through that much material. And I said, well, I do know where there's one place that goes through. However, it's on the other side of the office, over by the pastor's office, and it needs at least 50 to 75 feet of cable, which is a little bit far for how you're going to drive HDMI.
Right.
Not recommended. So I looked around, and I'm looking at all the HDMI balins that you can order, and I find, one set, and I read the reviews on it. This never works. Oh, it's horrible. And I'm like, okay, how about this one? So I took a chance on Prime Day and picked out a pair. They're little tiny things, about this big, and one transmitter, one receiver. The only magic that you would ever need on this is if the monitor isn't recognized by the Balun setup, you can take the transmitter, plug it into the monitor, and press a button on the side, and it exchanges information with the monitor to find its capabilities. And then when you plug it in to replace it, it can then work it over Ethernet to drive the Balun 75 to 150 feet. So I put it on a 75-foot cable, tested it out, seemed to work fine to that same monitor that I was going to put up there. And I was all ready to go ahead and start running the stuff through the overhead. And I asked the preschool director, well, what size monitor were you thinking of having? Oh, how about a 42-inch? So we don't happen to have an extra 42-inch monitor lying around, and I'm trying to persuade her through one of the other preschool directors that said, maybe this is a little large to put in your room because you're going to have to straddle a couple of the pillars for the windows that are around your office. So it'll be interesting. But the net result was I was able to split the signal, and I also was able to drive the signal through the splitter through a balun and run it another 75 feet away. Something that you don't normally run into with HDMI.
Well, I have done wireless HDMI using consumer level devices, and just the ones that have like about a 40-foot range. And there are some brands that really do a pretty decent job, or at least they were doing a pretty decent job under Windows 7.
Did it work through an infrastructure Wi-Fi, or did it do it through a private channel?
I believe they were paired on a dedicated channel.
Okay, so they had their own channel that didn't interfere, and it was 5 gigahertz or something, because I don't think you can find 2.4 clear anywhere now.
I don't remember what brand they were. They were Neread or Nereus, something like that. And those may actually work over just, they don't use your Wi-Fi.
Okay.
They pair the same way that the Microsoft to your television.
Same thing like video cameras work. They share the same Wi-Fi bands, but they don't operate with the same protocols.
Yeah, it might be something of that nature.
Yeah.
But I thought it was only 2.4 gigahertz, so there probably would be channel interference if there were a lot of people.
I know that the wireless cameras at Walmart use 2.4 gigahertz as well, which causes them no end of grief with all the access points they have typically installed in a Walmart store.
Right.
When I was dealing with the Walmart account, I actually got to see some of their setup. They had 117 access points in each store.
Wow.
Yes. So, and they did both 2.4 and 5, but a lot of the equipment only ran on 2.4.
Yeah.
So, interesting. But I thought about trying to use wireless, but if I can do the wired and have a dedicated link between the two, I think, well, this is the security system. I don't want it blinking out at the wrong moment. So we decided to, let's go ahead and do this, and they weren't expensive. It was something like, $40 or something for everything I needed. So we'll see how well that works. Yeah, I think somebody is trying to call me with a, yeah, good, I'm glad. I can't hear you, goodbye. Not a phone call, okay. I was just listening in the other room. But having to drive this thing, like I said, a security monitor, I didn't want to take a chance of it blinking out, and that's why I was worried about some of the baluns. If they become unsynchronized, what does it take to resynchronize them? It was kind of interesting, though, that the remote end is powered by the transmit end. So they actually send the power over the Ethernet cable to power the other end, so it doesn't require another power supply or dongle at the remote end. But that was kind of nifty. But that was just one of my wonderful things to play with. And as I was telling you, I got myself a new webcam. So that's about all I got for Prime Day. I'm sure you probably went to dessert, probably, right? Didn't go anywhere. Unmute. Still muted. There you go.
For some reason, something's been going on in the neighborhood. The water was out. There was a notice on the door. They got that fixed. But lots of sirens going by, and I have a dog that howls in synchronization whenever she hears a siren. So staying muted is the better part of valor here, because otherwise you're going to hear this major German Shepherd howl going on. And I don't mean Thurston howl.
The third.
Yeah, so she's in super hell mode. And it's been a tiring week. I went yesterday to see Wicked down at the Nederlander. And after the show, I went back to the blue line, and evidently was a problem on the blue line. The platform was full all the way to the back to the other side of people waiting for trains. And I looked it up in the Ventra app, and it showed no trains existing, which
Oh,
is a
geez.
bit of a problem. It showed buses, but no trains at all.
Uh,
Finally, after about 15 minutes, a train came with its lights flashing, labeled express, so it blew right by. Followed by another one labeled express, which blew right by. At which point I got on the train the other direction and went two more stops and got off at Jackson and got a seat on the train, because by the time that we got to Washington, it was already pretty packed.
wow.
But no, I
So did you win the lottery for your Wicked ticket?
Of course, my 43rd lottery win. I was fourth row center aisle.
That doesn't extend to Mega Millions at all, does it?
No. And this was not an easy lottery to win. They changed the rules. The front row lottery seats now are in person only. You have to get there early to end 4 hours early to get in the drawing, which is done 2 hours early to get to buy the tickets. And I sent a message to them saying, so basically, for people downtown, because what am I going to do? Come in from Schaumburg, wait 2 hours, find out if I won or not. If I didn't, I got to turn around and go back home. If I did, I've got to waste another 2 hours waiting.
They haven't thought it out.
Well, I get what they wanted to do, and it's fine, and I won, so I can't complain. But it just meant there are much fewer seats this run for lottery, the online lottery, because they took all of those other seats out of that in person. And then today I was out in Elgin at the community college. We got to appreciate the head chef autographed the menu for me and drew a little chef guy on this.
Cool.
They had so I had pumpkin gnocchi for an appetizer, and then for the entree I had the pan-seared scallops with parsnip puree, basil oil, and what it said on the menu was leeks, but it was actually something I've never seen before, which was watermelon cucumber. It looks like watermelon.
I've heard about it, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it looks like watermelon. It does, but it definitely wasn't leeks. And then for dessert, they had cream puffs.
Okay.
And they've cut back on desserts. They're having trouble getting enough students, and they can only do as much stuff as they have students. Got to meet, besides the head chef who autographed that, I got to meet the chef who made our entree that did the scallops. He designed them. Different guys do different items. So
okay.
He actually works downtown at a Michelin star restaurant.
Well, that's impressive.
Yeah. And then he works another job somewhere else as well, and he's going to school.
Oh, that keeps him busy.
You gotta have a lot of energy to do all that stuff.
So how can you afford to have the desserts? I thought you had to be in a like a carb restricted diet too.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're restricted.
Okay.
Restrictions up.
Let's see, how much did those carbs weigh? Oh, they couldn't have weighed more than 3 grams. Yeah.
I was careful though. I'm not. And the other thing with the dental surgery, I can only have soft stuff, and that's these are today's teeth. They were just put in today.
Wow.
I left Elgin, headed up to Northbrook, and they unscrewed the old ones and put these in. So These
So
are,
now you can eat anything?
no, that's not a matter of the teeth. That's a matter of the healing of the post in the
Oh,
bone.
jeez.
That takes about 12 weeks. They want you to
Okay.
wait 12
So you have
weeks.
another 8 to go?
No, I had it in around the end of August. So
Okay.
September, October, end of November.
So you're halfway through.
Well, yeah, no, a little more, about 2/3 almost.
Okay.
And so about another month on that, but that's not a matter of the teeth. The only thing that's driving me crazy is there's a gap between the teeth and the gums,
Ooh.
and it makes me feel Donald Ducky when I talk.
Mm-hmm.
They wait for it to heal, and then the final ones, the gap goes down to 0.5 millimeter. At that
Okay.
point, it won't be as much of an issue, but in the meantime, it just drives me crazy.
Sid,
Well,
you
I-
sound fine. You sound fine.
You do.
Thank you. You're kinder than my guys. The APCU meeting, somebody said, "Why do you sound so awful?"
It's the microphone.
I like you guys. You're nicer.
Yeah, by the way, while all this nice conversation was going on, I looked up what a balun is and how it relates to HDMI. Are we
Uh-huh.
going to be treated to some information on that during the presentation?
No, I was going to use that as a tickler for next month.
Okay.
I wanted, this is the introduction to HDMI for the most part, and I should have said part 1 of several parts. But the baluns, they don't work with all kind of media is the problem. Okay,
Right.
and I think that the secret is if your media is not a protected media, then your baluns will usually work.
Yeah.
But if it is protected and it wants to do encryption, then you have a little bit of a problem unless the balun can mimic the remote end's responses in real time.
Right. HDCP causes issues.
Yes. So as long as you're splitting something that doesn't need HDCP, you're not running from a DVD. Most computers probably don't require it. Not sure on if some implementations require it or not with super high definition monitors, but most of it is not originating content. I don't know what happens when you watch a movie on a laptop. Does it handshake with the monitor and make sure that it's a protected connection or not? So if it does,
depends on the monitor. If the monitor is HDCP compliant, all of that happens every time you stream, every time you do live TV, every time you do anything, every time you do your Chromecast, every time you do your TiVo stream, anything else.
yeah,
They all have to handshake.
That would make the balun work a lot harder.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think wireless HDMI cannot pass HDCP signals either.
And for good reason, it probably has an issue with the packet format and so on and so forth.
Yep.
That actually, though, that isn't always true. I have a friend who does sound, puts in home theater-y stuff.
Okay.
Mhm.
You can do that over wireless HDMI. You just have to have, I forget what it's called. There's a high-speed one. It has the bandwidth to be able.
Well, high-speed cables, okay. There is a provision for allowing somebody to use the equivalent of a spoofer for HDCP, but you have to have signed a non-disclosure, and you also have to, there's something else that you need. I think it's in my presentation. But you have to have a signed non-disclosure, and you have to have the right to use, I believe. Fair use. That's inside a fair use doctrine.
Yeah, some of them are sneakier than others. My TV, I had a non-compliant cable plugged in, and it wouldn't display anything. And what's funny, there was nothing plugged in the other end. It was just a hanging cable in an HDMI port. But that was enough to trigger it to say, nope, that cable.
Well, if it can't handshake with the other end, it's not going to let any signaling go by.
But there was no other end. What is it? It's just the cable sitting.
Well, that's the point, is that it needs the handshake from the target, from the monitor, to complete the HDCP handshake. So if it fails the HDCP handshake, it's going to say, oh, there's non-compliance at the other end, fail, boom. So it knocks you off. I do know that there was a case where there was a TV that was made that was HD. However, the way they worked, the way they interfaced the HDMI interface to the HD section was the HDMI interface was totally isolated to one section of the circuit board, and then within the TV, they routed their own high-def unprotected video. So if you were to buy one of these sets, and they weren't terribly expensive, I think they were $300, and tap into a section of the circuit board on these TV sets, you could extract the unencrypted video and route it to whatever you wanted it to, because the handshake would work. And the only way they could turn this off was to shut down everyone who had one of those TV sets. And I'm pretty sure it was a common brand. I don't know if it was a Samsung or an LG or something, but it was a relatively large brand that did this. I don't think the sets are available anymore, but it was an interesting premise.
I don't know if you remember the old days. People would use balance on the end of wire, so
Yeah.
they could use cheap wire to run networks.
Yeah.
I had a friend, I don't know if you knew Alan Berger. He had a client, a bank, and they used bell wire.
Yeah.
And they stuck on the balance, and every day at 2:30, the network crashed. Turned out there was a ham in the area. That's what he powered up.
Uh-huh. Well, usually they like it a shielded twisted pair, but it isn't always shielded. So sometimes you win, sometimes you don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So questions, we have open forum here. I haven't heard any questions yet, but we're open for accepting any.
I do.
Sure, go ahead.
For Prime Day, one of the things I purchased was a Blink camera system.
Okay.
And I installed the video doorbell. It got a good deal. Got the doorbell, the module. There's a local module that handles the video. It's like an interface module.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 cameras. I got the whole thing for $125. That was
Okay.
a good deal. So anyways, the video doorbell works fine. The module works fine. I have 1 camera installed, and the problem is that 1 camera, which talks to the module, and then it broadcasts it through the Wi-Fi network. That one I can't seem to connect freely, shall I say. Sporadically it'll connect, and I'll get occasional feeds. The camera is working, because when you go outside, you can tell that it's working and it's doing
Right.
recording, and then maybe later on you'll get some of the feeds, but it's not getting all the feeds from the camera, and I don't know what's wrong. To supplement my Wi-Fi, I set up a mesh network in the house because I have a ranch house, and the doorbell, the video doorbell is on one end of the house, and the other camera is on the other end of the house. So I had to have an additional router that I moved a little closer to the camera that I'm having problems with. So, any opinions? I've checked the signal strength. The signal strength from the camera to the module is good, but from the camera to my Wi-Fi network is only 2 bars. And at standard mode, it's only doing 2 megabits a second. Megabits.
Right. So it'll only run in SD mode. It won't run in HD mode.
Yeah, and I've tried dropping the quality down to see if that helped with connectivity, and it changed nothing.
Well, there's that I believe. Okay, where does the hub installed?
The hub is actually, it's like a puck.
I know exactly what the puck is. Okay,
so
somewheres I'm not on this computer, but on another computer, I downloaded all of the FCC information about that puck.
Okay, so the puck, I first had it centrally located in the house, like equidistance between the two devices.
Uh-huh.
And then I moved it closer to the camera that was giving me problems. So in terms of distance, it's probably 30, 40, 30 feet from where the camera is, but it's got to go through a garage door,
Yeah.
metal garage door, and a steel door between the garage and the house, because my garage is attached. So there's a steel fire door between the two.
Well, if you could put, as a test, put the module by a window by the front door, and where it would actually be a lot closer, and see, it's got to have both Wi-Fi and access to the camera at the same time. And I'm not sure, I think you can support multiple hubs, because some of the communication is going through the hub to the camera and back the other way. I don't think the camera always talks directly to Wi-Fi. Some of those devices don't even have Wi-Fi capable there, or Zigbee or something.
Uh-huh. Well, it runs on the 2.4 megahertz spectrum. It says it's
Wi-Fi. So you got to find something that's not on an interfering frequency. And I don't know if you can figure out from the hub whether or not it's on an interfering frequency or not.
Wouldn't that be dictated by the router?
No, because the router has his own channels and stuff like that. Unless the router is already frequency adverse, does he look for interference and change?
Okay, I can't answer that.
Okay.
Most
routers don't have an auto config that just says pick an open channel.
Right, which I did. I picked, when I originally set up my system, I picked 2.4, and I figured I started at channel 7, locked them into 7.
Are you running only in 20 megahertz mode on 2.4, or did you allow it to use 40?
I did not specify.
Well, so if you only do 20 megahertz, you'll have less interference, because 40 megahertz takes up 2/3 of the band.
Okay.
So you may want to try and see whether it will work with 20. Most of the stuff that I have here, I only use 2.4 as for communicating to devices that only talk that, and most of my industrial strength stuff is all going through 5 gig.
Okay.
Yeah. See, right now this laptop is only doing 5 gig, and my phones both support 5 gig when they're connected. But things like the Wemo devices are 2.4 only, so that's a necessary evil. And I've had to reposition some of my access points so they can even be covered. But I know the critical element with the Blink system is that hub. The hub is supporting the communication to your router, and also is talking to the cameras and the other devices that Blink support.
So my best, what you suggested, moving the that puck towards a window?
Yeah, well, like someplace where it can go around the corner to your camera, because Wi-Fi is not going to go necessarily in a straight line. If there's a sharp edge, it can diffract around the edge.
Okay.
So just getting it even close so that you're not trying to go through, I'm assuming you have a steel door on the garage door?
Yes.
A Wi-Fi does not go through the steel very well. It might go through the cracks when it's open, but it's not going to go through the steel door. So if you can do anything to position the hub where it can adequately drive and talk to the camera, you'll probably be better off.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure you can have more than one hub, because the hub only supports so many devices, as I recall.
Yeah, but I currently only have 2 devices on that hub. I'm not worried about maxing that out. I think it might be 10 devices per hub.
Well, it's just that you may need multiple hubs for coverage is the problem, because there's no provision on the hub for an external antenna.
Okay. All right.
I mean, you could open it up, and I think there is at least one breakdown article where they took it apart.
Okay.
You may be able to find that online. I was looking at, I have a collection of Blink cameras that are currently unusable by me because the previous owner who installed them illegally didn't relinquish the password on the devices, and Amazon will not free up the devices under any circumstances, even though I am the paid owner of these devices when I purchased the property. they're still looking for this stuff to come back, but I've sort of thought about setting up a spoof Wi-Fi to what they were originally connected to, and then have it talk to that and see what trying to handshake. Because the first thing it's going to do when it tries to handshake with Amazon, because that's what it does, it's going to try and upgrade all of the firmware. And some of the older firmware, you can compromise and get into root mode on the puck. There's you can open the puck up, and then there's a couple pins you can tie into, and you can basically defeat and run Linux on the puck.
Okay.
The puck has got a lot more brains in it than the camera does. The puck has 4 megabytes of memory, I think. No, 4 gig. Maybe it's 4 gig of memory. I mean, it's got some significant memory because that's where it can store stuff on the way to the cloud.
Right. Okay.
And I'm not sure if the puck supported an SD card. I'm trying to remember.
USB stick.
Yeah, USB stick. Yeah, it could support a USB stick, because I was thinking, well, maybe I could have it record locally and then I could just look at it that way. But no, they wanted to. The other, like I said, the other person did not release it, and they would have to uninstall it out of their system in order for me to be able to install it somewhere else.
They said that you could watch the stuff that's on the USB stick, but you have to remove the USB stick to read it.
Yeah.
What kind of
That
system
I would
is
believe.
that?
Kind of a pain, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I'm only 4 days into this ownership of this thing. That it came in on Tuesday, and I ran around and got this thing all installed because I was leaving to go out of town.
right.
And I wanted to make sure it worked. And then, of course, the day before, I had to set up this mesh network. And I'd like to sidetrack and go into that discussion real briefly about this, about the mesh network that I set up, if you will.
Sure.
I have originally, I'm set up with an ASUS router, the AC 1900. And
Okay.
then I bought at a garage sale an ASUS AC 3100. I left the 1900 unit as my primary, and then I wanted to set up the second one as in the mesh. So what I did is I first tried to do it following their procedures that they have online. It's supposed to be really easy to do. And I actually connected this 3100 to my wired network and positioned it somewhere else in the house. But every time I tried to get the two to mesh together, I would get an error message saying it couldn't communicate with the other device. Make sure no one else is trying to access it or trying to program it. It's already been programmed.
Are you allowed to mesh with two physical connections?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
According to this, you're allowed to do this. So
All right.
It took me a full day to try to figure out what the hell was going on. And embedded somewhere in the documentation that they don't tell you, but I did find it, you have to have WPS turned on. Well, Sanford by default turns off WPS in my router, but
Yeah,
in
makes
order
sense.
in order for the two to mesh together, it needed WPS to be turned on. I think initially, I don't know down the line if I'm able to turn that off, but once I turned that feature back on in my primary router, the AC 1900, when I turned it on, the two meshed up just fine, and it programmed itself, and everything's working great.
Well, the one thing that would test is turn off WPS, then power cycle your routers and see if they're still happy with each other.
Yes, I will do that when I get back home. That'll be an experiment I'll try, but I just thought I'd tell you that I learned this aspect of it. And so I have two routers in the house that are probably 25 feet apart, but I want to extend this distance much further.
Right. Well, I'm not sure what choice you have of Wi-Fi channels and whether you're using 20 megahertz or 40 megahertz. But if you're using 20 megahertz, and you have your mesh on, let's say, channels 1 and 11, and then you could use like a dedicated access point or like an old router just set up on channel 6 to talk to the puck. Perhaps the puck will have better luck without any interference. The puck may not work that well on mesh. I'm not sure if it's critical on latency or not when it's trying to reach Amazon.
I tried doing the access point first. When I couldn't get to the mesh, I set up the 3100 as an access point. But that started creating other issues where I was getting complaints about problems with the internet from the chief executive of home administration, my wife.
Well, if you do set up your secondary router as a additional access point, you want to make sure it's not on the same frequency as the main router, different channels.
Okay.
One's on 6, one's on 11, one's on 1, making sure they're completely different channels, so they don't share the same channel, because if they do share the same channel, there's going to be a buffer between the two where there's a no man's land, where it has equal signal strength from both, and it has maybe a 10% collision ratio at that location. That's not good.
Okay.
So
the mesh sets it up with the same channels, though.
I believe so. Yeah. So the question is whether mesh is set up for 20 or 40 megahertz, which wipes out most of the band. You need to find out, is it the high end of the band or the low end of the band? Because it doesn't use high and low at the same time. It uses one or the other. So you figure out which is the other one you want to use, and hopefully it's not the 11 for your separate access point, because channel 11 is where your microwave oven is going to leak.
Okay.
So when you use your microwave oven, that's like on channel 10, 2450 megahertz. And if there's any leakage around the door, it's going to drop your connection.
Okay.
So keep aware of that if you're dealing with that issue. But I'm just trying to see, because I know the Zigbee is also sharing the same band as Wi-Fi. If Zigbee is what they use to talk to the camera to control the camera, not necessarily to have data, but I mean, if Zigbee is being used on that, you want to try and free that up as much as possible too. And Zigbee is also a frequency adverse, it'll automatically try and find the right channel so that it doesn't interfere. I think Zigbee channel like 11 or 10 is like the equivalent of 6. Last time I checked, I think there was like 22 Zigbee channels, twice the number of regular channels. So I'm not, like I said, I don't know if you can even see that level of what Zigbee channel they're trying to utilize in the puck. I don't think it'll let you get down to that level.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure, if you look at the FCC ID papers on it, you sort of get an idea on the camera. What is the camera talking on? What is the puck talking on? And the puck has both the Wi-Fi and the Zigbee chips built into it. I don't think the camera has both. I think the camera only had the Zigbee chip, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Well, they supposedly work on 2.4.
Well, they work on 2.4, but Zigbee goes a lot farther than Wi-Fi does for the same signal strength, because it's half the bandwidth or even a fraction of the bandwidth. So they're counting on being able to get that 2 or 4 megabits per second of bandwidth, but also drive it, maybe 150 feet.
Right.
So, but if there's a strong Wi-Fi mesh signal that's clobbering it, it's not going to work so well either.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's, all right. So I'll try with those few tips that you gave me in regards to the camera.
Yes, it should. At least you can experiment and see, well, is this more reliable? Am I getting any drops in the camera? I can't see the camera. 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 I can't see.
That's what I'm getting now, is I can and cannot.
Yeah,
the doorbell is fine. It's the other one I can't get.
It sounds like it's interference limited, and so it's something on it that's doing that. And I don't remember what the resolution of the camera is versus the doorbell, if it's the same.
They're both 720.
They're both 720. Okay.
Oh, wait, I'm not confirm on that. I believe the camera's 720. I'm sorry, I believe the doorbell's 720. I'm not sure what the camera is. I'll have to
Yeah.
look it up.
I thought the cameras were capable of almost HD,
That could be.
and that means it'll need more bandwidth and less interference. See if it tells me. They want at least a 2 megabits per second upload speed for the Wi-Fi, but I don't think it really says anything about what the Zigbee requirements. Link, camera, resolution.
Oh, it says 1080p.
Yeah, so it's going to want a little more.
It can record up to 1080p.
Yeah. But it's got to transmit it to the puck, because the puck is the guy that has the memory, and he also has the interface upstream.
Okay.
So of course, you know the cameras. Are you running the cameras on a dedicated power source? Or are you running it on the lithium battery?
The doorbell is on a dedicated with the battery backup, and the other is strictly off a battery.
You can't use alkaline batteries. You have to use lithium batteries for those.
They give you batteries with it.
Yeah. Okay. So you did get the batteries that came with. Those are lithium.
Yeah, they give you
yeah.
they give you lithium batteries with it. They're supposed to last 2 years.
on a really good universe, yes.
Right.
Without interference. But if it's got more interference, it will go through those.
Sure. I think it's also the more it reads, the more it's active, the more it does that.
Yes, it's. I know people have taken issue with because it's a calculation of 2 years based on so many movement events, and if you have more than that number of movement events, your battery life will suffer.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, it's not a hard and fast thing for 2 years. It's a calculation based on so many recorded movements of this duration, and this is how long it'll, at this resolution, and so on. I had gone into it at some point in time. Like I said, I was intending to crack it, but then I would have incurred the wrath of Amazon as well. They might have taken away my Prime subscription. Joking.
Yep.
Yes. Do we have another question there? Did I see a hand up? Yes, go ahead. Unmute.
I know. Yeah. Oh boy. Hang on. All right. Well, yeah.
That's a big dog.
She likes people. I was gonna say, back to the issue with Blink. Also make sure, if you need to, you check with their tech support. At the same Prime Day, I bought the Blink doorbell.
Okay.
And it turned out that the unit was defective.
Oh.
That they had to ship me another unit because it wasn't able to connect properly. And they couldn't get it to do it either. So it turned out it was a bad unit.
Oh, okay. That will be part of my rooting out the problem. I'll move the camera closer to the puck and make sure that it's not a communication problem. And then the other thing it says is reset my whole network. In other words, just do a warm reset on everything.
What is the outside camera mounted to?
It's actually mounted to the frame of the garage. The trim molding around the garage, because
that's wood molding, not aluminum fascia.
Correct. That's
okay.
wood.
All right.
And
I was going to make sure you didn't have steel siding or aluminum siding there.
There is aluminum siding, yes. All around it is aluminum siding. I've got metal garage doors.
Okay, so it might have a problem. You have to check the possible paths that can go through, because it's not going to go through a barrier to 2.4. Now, if it was mesh, big enough mesh, the Wi-Fi could go through it. But I think it's anything smaller than 3 centimeters. It's going to look like a solid piece of material.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll try putting the this stuff near a window and see if that helps. So maybe it could project around the house or something.
Yeah, I mean, I was playing with some of the Simply Safe stuff, which does a very similar setup, except that their camera itself talks directly to the Wi-Fi, doesn't go through a hub. It needs the hub to help control it, but the camera video only goes through the Wi-Fi.
Okay.
That's one of the differences between Simply Safe versions. And then there was somebody else that was advertising a whole bunch of cameras. Was it on Prime Day? Some other brand of cameras came up. Oh, I know who else was. Roku is offering cameras now that work with your Roku system. And I don't know, they had a video camera for the doorbell, but I don't know whether it would support a front and a back doorbell or not.
Is that
But you replace the chime, you replace the doorbell. I guess it uses the same transformer. I don't know if that's true or not, but because you can't find too much information other than the question and answer that are there. And I didn't want to call them up and then drop blood in the water and then the Roku sharks start circling. But they had additional camera support, and it sounded pretty reasonable. I thought it was like 7-day storage was like $24 a year or something like that, which I thought that's better than a lot of the other video storage prices. I mean, it's not 30 days, but if you can't record it and transfer it in 7 days, then, well, then you probably don't need that much storage. But you can either talk to an app on your phone, or you can use, I believe you can use your Roku device to see the camera. So any TV that has a Roku connected to it, oh, let's go look at the camera. So I don't have to have a dedicated monitor somewhere. I don't have to have my phone with me. I can just fire up the Roku and, hey, let's go check the cameras. Who's at the front door?
I didn't check it yet, but that must be the new Roku home security system.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it is. Because I thought it was like, because I misread the email when they said, did they say UMA, home security? Because I know that UMA has been trying to get into that area as well, but no, this is Roku. This is Roku. This is the video guy.
I read something just briefly. I didn't have time to go into any depth, but I do remember Roku has somewhere I read it a home security system now.
But it was like supposed to be released maybe last week, because it was all like pre-order or something like that, pricing and stuff. And I thought, well, I chanced this, but I don't want to if I have to replace my time, then I lose my back doorbell. So I got to deal with that. But I thought, well, if I had the camera for the front and the back, I'd jump on that right away. Because the prices were still a lot cheaper than some of the other cameras that are out there. So that may be a possibility as well. I still think it was only 2.4 gigahertz, which has been one of my beefs with most of the cameras anyway, is they're all insistent on continuing operation on 2.4, which we already know is polluted. And every time I turn around, whose signal's coming in here now? And I'm 150 feet away from my closest neighbor. Somebody's running their stuff a little on the hot side. So, okay, other questions? Dennis, you're too quiet. Did you have a question from last month that we didn't answer?
I don't think so.
By the way, the email announcement from Roku on Roku Smart Home was dated for me October the 12th.
Yeah, I think it was relatively, yeah. It was, let's see if I can have mine right here. Probably was the same day.
Simple way to a smarter home. And they show cameras, light bulbs, look like multicolor, a doorbell, and a Wi-Fi lamp type module.
Yeah, I was looking at that. That that looked like another devices. But then I'm thinking, okay, I already have Wemos here, do I want to replace my Wemos with something else, and will it have the same capability?
Well, the camera right in the center looks like a Wise camera.
It could very well be somebody else's camera. I didn't try and look into the detail because it hadn't been released yet. I figured, well, once they start publishing this, I can see if somebody has a picture of it with the FCC ID on it, and then I can go into it and see, well, who's the original manufacturer of it.
I'm going down in this and looking at some of the cameras, and they look like Wise devices. Probably that Wi-Fi module is too. I'm not sure about the lamp.
Uh-huh.
Don't know about the doorbell because I didn't even know they. I'm not sure if Wise had a doorbell or not.
Well, I couldn't remember if they had one or not, but when I saw it, I thought, okay, there's the camera, and then I started looking at some of the stuff as well, and like I said, I went into their webpage, and it glossed over a lot of the detail. Okay, so they couldn't say, can you support more than one doorbell? Would be nice. If so, what do I have to do to set up? Do I have to have 2 chimes, 2 doorbells, set it up that way? Or, some other setup.
Well,
And I like the idea of the additional cameras. I really thought about, that would be a nice way to do it, display it as an app on my Roku.
Well, it looks like they're using a phone for the lamps, controlling the color hue that comes out of it. But if I'm correct, they also are showing LED strip lights. The long strips that have multi LEDs. So it looks like there's a double way of controlling lighting devices.
Okay. Well, the one thing I rely on with my Wemo devices is the fact that I have the rules set up with them. And one of the nicer rules that I've come across is the ability to turn on lights at the equivalent of some offset of sundown. Whenever sundown is, turn on the light plus or minus some number of hours, and then turn it off so many hours after that, or after at some fixed time. So we used to do this with the Christmas lights, don't need to have them on before sundown. So I set up a rule that says at sundown, turn on the Christmas lights, internal and external. Boom, done. Automatic for the whole season. Didn't have to go check a timer. If the power bounces up and down, I'm not going and resetting a timer somewhere to make sure it's right. Or have a timer that has a built-in battery backup to keep it right. And then I have to go and figure out what buttons do I have to use to set up time again. These are just like a set and forget. Plug them in and add the rule to it. Done. And the nice thing about it, you don't have to have them plugged in all the time. You can just have them sitting there, just ready to go next season. I have not seen any updates for the modules as of recently, although I expect that there would have been, but every once in a while I wait for another sale of Wemo modules over at Costco. That's where I got my previous 8 or 10 of them, something like that. The only downside I can say to the setup for Wemo was that you can only manipulate one account at a time. Okay, if you have a Wemo app and you sign into your Wemo and you're trying to control it, or you leave it logged on, you can't have it set up for home 1 and home 2. At least not with any of the stuff that I had seen in the past. I don't think they've modified it since. But it would have been nice, like, I could have Wemo devices here, I could have Wemo devices at a vacation home, and I could turn on lights there and see if there can be turned on and off, and if there's a problem with it, let me know, all that good stuff. But nope, didn't have that option. That would be worth it, being able to have control multiple homes and so on. Uh-oh, what do you got there, Wayne? You have to unmute.
Yeah, this is what I've got. I've got X10, but I also bought some of these. It's called BN Link,
BN Link.
and it works on Wi-Fi. I got it through Amazon, and I can program it and to turn on and off, or you can manually turn it on and off because it has a little light. Has a little light on it.
Right. Yeah, I have a push button on mine that I can manually turn it on and off. But it's a little hard when it's behind the sofa.
Yeah, yeah. But I've got about 3 or 4 of those around, and then of course the rest of it I've still got X10. So I've had X10 for 40 some odd years.
My brother was really big into X10. You want to talk about the extent of X10 he used? He had a sprinkler system on X10.
But X10 came out here a few years ago. They've got a module now that works on the Wi-Fi that you can actually program it.
On the BN Link, does that require you to have an app on your Android phone to be able to program them and set them up?
Yeah, it's on my Apple phone.
Okay, but there's no provision for maintaining it or checking it with a web browser at all.
Not that I know of.
Yeah, because that's the restriction. That's how they secure it. They only want you to do work on it through an Android or Apple phone device. You can't go in and you can do some stuff with a web browser. I should qualify that. You have to have, there is like an API that somewhere on one of my machines I have a copy of, and I'm able to execute certain command functions in a command window to turn on a specific Wemo device and turn it off. So there is a way to do it. It's sneaking it through and mimicking as if it came from one of the phones. And I'm not running it on an Android simulator either. Let's see, I don't have it on this machine, on a different machine. Let's see if I can go check the other machine. Okay. See if I have it here. I played with it for a little bit. It had some reliability issues because it wasn't a positive handshake. Yeah, it's taking its sweet time to open up the other machine. It's probably gone to sleep or something. Thought I left it running, but I'll wait for it to come back. Anyhow, there's a way you could do to query a status of a device, to turn the device on, turn the device off, and it was like what was it? It was a script that you ran in a window. I think that's what it was. The script that you could have. See if my thing has come back. Yeah. So for some reason it doesn't want to get to it.
Those scripts aren't what you're looking for. Is not IFFT or
No, it's not an IFFT. It's a definite. It's not an IFFT. It was a Windows script that was able to send a particular packet. And
okay, so there's a script.
There's a script. Yeah, and you could do it in the command window. And it was, I was playing with it. I could turn things on, off, good, status, yeah, okay. And every once in a while it would hang up. So, and then I'd have to reset stuff to do it. But
when you talk about scripts, I'm always thinking Linux.
Well, Linux would probably be able to do it too. Let's see.
It's just that Linux natively uses so many scripts.
Yeah. I know there's a Python module.
That'll work.
Yeah.
That's agnostic.
Yeah.
Either Java or Python or Ruby. All are agnostic.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which one that I downloaded. I have to go down to the other machine to take a look at it, and then you'd not have my happy face here, so that wouldn't work so well.
Come on, we'd manage.
I know you'd manage.
Sid would fill in for you.
Yes. Okay. Well, seeing this,
Sid's dog will fill in for you right now.
the dog will fill in for me. Okay. Tell you what I'm going to do here. Since it is at 8 o'clock, we may as well start the presentation. And this is really more like part one, okay? But it's a flavor, and it shows you some of the places you can go and get some of the information that you want. I thought first I'd go a little bit on some of the history of it. HDMI is an acronym, High Definition Multimedia Interface. It's been around for a while. It was originally designed for single direction between DVD players and monitors, and original DVD and audio CDs, audio DVDs, and Blu-ray. Digital interface, and one of its claim to fame was to use the CMDS, Transition Minimized Differential Signaling, to reduce the bandwidth that it needed to try and transmit high bandwidth information over conventional cabling. It uses current mode logic for its signaling and encoding. Why current mode logic? Because current mode logic is more resistant to interference and also for higher bandwidth. HDMI 1.0, anybody can think back that far? 2002? I'm pretty sure that some of my early devices are in the HDMI 1.3 category. I don't think I had anything that was HDMI 1.0. But this defined the standard connection with the standard HDMI connector you're familiar with, and one that I've never seen, although it was postulated, called the dual link, which looks like it's an HDMI connection on steroids that's twice as big. Nobody's implemented anything with it, so I kind of think it's unlikely we're going to see that anytime soon. It was released way back 20 years ago and supplanted by the 1.1 version after they wanted to support DVD audio. Connector, pretty simple, is 19 pins, 10 on the top, 9 on the bottom, and it sort of looks like a D-type connector, but they number the pins differently than any other D connector I've ever seen used. And I have a picture coming up of that. Originally, it had enough bandwidth to support 1080p and wideband UXGA, 1920 by 1200 at 60 hertz. Really wasn't pushing the envelope much. Here's the connector. You can see the way the connector pins are labeled, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It bounces back and forth as it's numbering them. So it's staggering between the top and the bottom as it goes down. You'll notice that there's actually data bit 0, 1, and 2. That's where all of the high-speed data goes through. The clock can also be used as a data pin as well, but it only uses it at 1/10 the bandwidth as the rest of them. Okay. 14 and 19 are interesting because that's where one of the newer releases of HDMI allows it to have some of the back channel audio and also Ethernet support. When you have Ethernet over HDMI, it's 100 megabits. HDMI 1.3, it allowed a significant increase in bandwidth, went up to 2560 by 1440. And then they also brought out the mini HDMI connector that some phones had back then. 1.4, that's probably one of the most common HDMI releases that you will find, and almost everything you have that does 1.4 will also do it on the regular cable and not require the high-speed cable. High-speed cable, pretty much you need for the HDMI 2.x stuff to begin with. It supported the original connectors, the mini and a micro connector, as well as there was a specialty automotive version I've never seen. HDMI 1.4 released in 2009, so it's 12 plus years. And it had the standardized timing for 4K video, although it didn't support all of the refresh rates at the time. some of the high-end refresh rates were a little bit too much for HDMI 1.4. Also added was the 100 megahertz Ethernet connection between endpoints, which is bidirectional and allows sharing of internet between those two devices. Also, the ARC, the audio return channel, was added, sharing the Ethernet via little packets that went back and forth. Everything on HDMI is digital. There's no analog involved here, okay? But it's packetized and sends different packets back and forth to affect the different technologies. 1.3 and 1.4 spec cables differ only that the 1.4 have the Ethernet connections over pins 14 and 19. 2.0, 2.1, that's where we're going to. There's my typo right there. I got a comma instead of a period. Bigger, faster, better. It supposedly can crank up to 18 gigabits per second through the same TMDX encodings as previous, except that they do additional pixels per color depth. Did I get the slide here? Hold on. Let me see. Bits per color. Okay, that was the key right there. The bits per color on the original HDMI was like 8 and 10, and now they have 24 bits per color depth with HDMI 2.0. You have 32 audio channel support and dual video streams. You can have more than one video stream going through the same cable for different users. This came out 9 some odd years ago. 2.1 cranked it a little bit more to go to 10K resolution at 120 hertz, and that was in 2017. I have not seen a 10K receiver yet. I think they thought about it, but 4K is sort of the platform where most people have sort of migrated to. There's also some stuff for 3D that was implemented along the way as well, but 3D hadn't taken off, 4K did. Okay, so the question is anything going to migrate beyond 4K? Not right away. I think the restriction for going beyond this, beyond 4K, would be primarily how much bandwidth is it going to take to support it downloading, and when am I going to hit my cap on Comcast or whoever I have. 1 terabyte might be a lot, but when you're downloading everything as 4K, you can go through it in a hurry. Also brought in high dynamic range. It actually came in between 2.0 and 2.1 as 2.0B. The high frame rate for 4K, 8K, and 10K resolutions at 120 hertz. The other thing that HDMI 2.1 did, it doubled the internal clock rate for the higher bandwidth modes. So the clock rate was relatively benign before with the 1.4. Now they've cranked it up, so it's some serious speed. You have to have premium cable to do the HDMI 2.1. Downside. Well, this was added specifically for DVD audio and video and Blu-ray media, HDCP. HDCP allows encryption between endpoints if the source requires it. So driven by the source, if the source wants encryption turned on, the handshake has to succeed, otherwise the screen goes blank. That's why non-compliant devices can't handle resolutions that are exceeding basically standard definition. If it's standard definition, yeah, go ahead and steal it. We'll let you digitize it, do whatever you want with it. But the high definition, not going to do it with HDMI unless you found a way to get around the HDCP protection. There are HDCP strippers that can be used, but they require a non-disclosure and they have to qualify under a fair use restriction. So they got to know who is going to be using the stripper, and then you could use it. Standard HDMI cable. Most of them support 1.4, can be used for most connections that are not bandwidth limited. The high-speed cables, if you're really pushing the 4K and you're doing high refresh or a special monitor out there that needs high refresh and high resolution, yes, you're going to need the high-speed cable. How far do you want to push a cable? Probably not much more than 25 feet. if you start going beyond that 7 meters or 7.5 meters, then it starts to degrade. If you want to go farther and you're not using high frequency, you're not using high resolution, and you're not using HDCP, HDMI valence can be used over Cat6 Ethernet cable to drive over 150 feet. I think some of them claim 248 feet, others reclaim 100 and some odd feet. The ones I got say they'll do over 140 some odd feet, and they seem to be working fine for a regular monitor display, but it is not trying to support streaming. Your mileage may vary. Can it split? Yes, you can split the stream, but it only works when the streams are basically computer sources that are not trying to carry protected content. And you're also not carrying audio, because a lot of the splitters will split the video, they won't split the audio. Don't know why, they just say up front, we don't carry the audio. So you can use a splitter to distribute the video around the place. You're going to have to find a different method to get the audio through, unless you get a special splitter that can support both. The splitters I have are relatively small. A couple things that I did see was that you can sometimes find adapters that it will adapt between HDMI and DVI or VGA or other types of interfaces. You can actually, and then there's a DisplayPort cable which can be cooked up to talk to HDMI, but DisplayPort is so close to HDMI, all you need is the physical wiring of the cable for the most part to support it. DVI is very similar as well. DVI does not require much of the levels to be changed or the packets to be intercepted. In fact, it's just basically a wiring because the packetization is very similar between those two. And this is my reference page. So if you're really looking for the next thing before I can put another presentation together, these are the places to go. There's a wealth of information on Wikipedia, a lot of information if you're trying to see difference in versions and such. This is the place to go. There's also a link in there to points to TDMS if you want to, TDMS, hold on. TMDS, typo. TMDS, yes, in Wikipedia for the description of the signaling and how it works. Also, there's another wealth of information that exists on the HDMI.org website and forum. If you wanted to download specifications to find out how the nitty-gritty on how some of this stuff works, and you wanted to become one of these interface points, they tell you here's what it's going to cost you, 15 cents a connector, and so on and so forth. You can download the spec. They do want a valid email address if you want to download it, and then you become known to them. But there's a lot of stuff that's on the HDMI site. And a lot of promotion for HDMI 2.1 and beyond. So there's a lot more information about HDMI than I'm able to present here. However, this is get your idea, your feet wet, so to speak, on what you can find. I'll show you some of the other stuff here. Let me change the share and change it back to this guy. So this is a little bit whiter, probably. Hopefully everyone can see it. But there's the connectors right there. There's another picture of the connector. I wanted to show the other different connectors that existed here as well. Here's the other kind of connectors that exist. The standard, the dual link, like I said, I've never seen a dual link. Mini and the micro. Micro, I think I've had on a phone before. And an automotive connection system, which is also strange that it's got a rounded type of connector, almost like a USB connector type. And then there's a pictorial, there's pictures of some of these connectors as well. looks like the micro HDMI connector could easily be confused with some phone connectors. Also, in this same article, if you want to dive into it, there's a lot of information here. Here is all the dates and the actual date and month when these things were released. Years are fine for me. They go into great detail here. Here's the maximum data rate on the different versions. It's kind of interesting. For the original release, it was only 4 gigabits per second. But as they came out with the newer version, they cranked it up to 8. And then finally, when they did 2.0 and 2.1, they went up to 14 or as high as 42 gigabits per second. A lot of serialization going on there. And not sure what you're going to be displaying there. Maybe your holodeck is going to require that much big bandwidth to be displayed. So that's basically what I had. Any questions? Silence. You're all astounded.
Very informative, though.
There's a lot of information there. Like I said, I will try and put some more together that I had planned. There's some other sources that I wasn't able to access that I wanted to get to, and it's going to take a little bit longer, but I will pull the information and more about the splitters and the restrictions of the splitters. The splitters are kind of interesting. The fact that they even have a button on the side. And I'm thinking, what is this button used for on the Valen? And the Valen is you take the transmitter, take it over to the monitor you're going to play on the receiver, plug it into this, push this button, and then it handshakes with the monitor, copying its information into the Valen, so it takes a set on that monitor. Now you take it over to the other end where you're going to plug it into the source and plug the receiver into the monitor. And now that Valen can mimic some of the monitor's responses at the other end. So it doesn't have to handshake over the Cat6 cable on whatever length of cable it needs. I think there's probably, if I were to get into some of the timing, there may be some timing issues that have to be answered in a certain number of microseconds or picoseconds maybe on some of the handshakes. Otherwise, the HDMI mimic doesn't work so well. So that's probably why they have to copy something locally so it doesn't have to do end-to-end and do a handshake with the device to get the information. So, and what I can do is I can do this. I can do this, and I can do, let's do everyone in meeting. All right, my computer gets what I want right there.
I've got an HDMI connector mini one that goes on my Raspberry Pi for the video.
You have a Raspberry Pi Zero then?
No, it's a Raspberry Pi. I don't know. It's got about four gigs of memory, and
Okay, all right.
I got it a year ago.
Okay, so maybe it's a new one. 2B. It's a 2B or something, or
Yeah,
the 3B.
right.
Okay.
3.
I might actually have a mini on one of my Raspberry Pis because I remember driving it with an HDMI connector somewheres. So I would have had to have the adapter as well. I mean, I have several types of adapters that I wanted to put in my next presentation, but I'll talk about them now. I have HDMI to VGA, and I have an HDMI to DisplayPort to HDMI, and I think I got an HDMI to DVI somewhere around as well.
Yeah, this is a Pi 4.
Pi 4, okay.
4K on the video, 4 gigabytes of memory, and it's got a 64 gigabyte micro memory chip.
Yeah. And-
Got the operating system on it.
And
Got
the thing you're holding up, Tim, is which one?
No, this is the DVI to HDMI. I use it on the monitor some when I have an occasional need to have a machine connect to HDMI. I've only got a couple machines that require that. Most of them use still VGA or DVI connectors, but I do have a couple now that I have to use the HDMI, like it or not.
Okay.
But it
And
was an
Sanford put a question out to us as well. He said, since HDMI 2 can transmit so much data, why don't we use this format instead of USB? Probably because it's transmitting more than just data. It's transmitting video. It can transmit other stuff like audio as well.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's transmitting it like the audio, if you could ever transmit the audio that fast. I'm not sure on the data provision whether it would have to mimic video, because when it's transmitting the data, it's actually converting it, the equivalent bits per color. It's actually doing a translation of the incoming data to go into a different number of bits to be transmitted in packets via the TMDF. So you may be coming in with 8-bit bytes that gets turned to 10-bit over the cable in the packets between the two. You don't need to necessarily go between those two. And USB-C is capable of doing 10 gigabits per second already as a data connection between devices. So I would just think it would just be superfluous to push HDMI the same direction. HDMI pretty much handles the displays. USB-C handles most of the disk devices and high-speed data. I mean, you could. I'm not sure. Has anybody had like a USB-C Ethernet that did higher than 1 gigabit per second? I haven't looked for one, but I wonder if there's anything out there getting it in and out of your machine. Part of the problem of driving data rates that much, I know in the past it had been using like about 1/4 of your old 486 to drive to this controller, just for the bandwidth needed to be able to support it. And not the disk controller, the Ethernet controller. When you were using gigabit Ethernet, it would use 1/4 of your processing power. Now, granted, with your multiple cores, you can dedicate a core that can handle most of your network requirements. It could go faster, but at some point in time, even USB controllers are going to need to have either a direct path to memory and be able to do your transmission for you. Did you say something, Sanford? I heard something there. No. Okay.
No, you must have heard me moving around. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I wasn't sure. I saw it lit up and I thought maybe you were trying to get a word in edgewise. But I could see, there's still a place for USB-C being the ubiquitous one that also transmits power. That's probably another advantage to using it as opposed to just using HDMI. I think some power can be delivered on HDMI, but not a lot. Okay, it's a trivial amount if it is. Because I know that, did they ever come out with a Chromecast device that did need a separate USB connection? Only ran off the HDMI port on the TV set?
I haven't really heard of it. You see, HDMI is not designed for two-way communication. It's designed primarily for one-way communication, outbound.
Right, except for the Ethernet. The Ethernet can go bidirectional.
Right.
So,
but USB-C has been the standard on which they've been settling for almost everything.
yeah.
All the peripherals are now going to use it. Probably even printers. And it also can do video and it can do audio. Yeah. And in fact, on one of my PCs, I use USB-C for the headset while I am in meetings, as well as for the webcam. I can do both on the
Right.
same hub. Sometimes that causes a little bit of interference, but usually not.
Mhm.
And so that's the kind of thing HDMI was not designed to do.
Right.
It's engineered for a great deal of throughput one direction.
Right. To the monitor. So it can be displayed. Well, why would it need 42 gigabits? I'm not sure yet.
We will find out when we get robots in our homes or holograms. When this metaverse comes to life.
Have you seen the show that's been airing on Epix called War of the Worlds?
No.
They have it's an overseas production, and it's a different take on the War of the Worlds, but the quote aliens, which are really us from the future, we're wiping out Earthlings with Boston Dynamics type robots that were wandering around, and they would come up and put their head next to somebody else's head and then fire a bolt into it and put them out like you would cattle. Anyhow, they did not actually have a full functioning Boston Dynamics robot. What they did was they took pictures of it in every possible direction so they could mimic it with CGI. And then they added their own sound effects to these things as they walk, which is unlike the real Boston Dynamics robots making any noise at all, other than the pistons moving it. They're relatively quiet. But these things in the War of the Worlds they make quite a bit of racket as they're walking.
Well, Boston Dynamics is trying to teach the dog how to bark. And ultimately, they do want to put something like an Alexa type device in the humanoid.
Well, I had heard that they were talking about at least they can use them right now for surveillance. And I read somewhere that somebody was trying to hook it up to have it as a platform for supporting a automatic weapon as well. Which
And
is
also,
probably, yeah.
And also some uses in settings like hospitals, where they want to give a more human touch to the tech.
Yeah. But I can just see, this is the thing where Skynet takes over.
Yeah. Well, all you got to do is move to China. They've already got it.
They already have their version of Skynet, yes. I'm just surprised when they came up with the Terminator movies and then they first fired up Skynet. It didn't say there is another.
Mm-hmm.
For those that caught that particular reference, there was an old movie in the 1960s called Colossus, the Forbin Project.
Yeah.
And they hooked up this giant computer with tubes, this tube-based computer that was buried under a mountain in the Dakotas somewhere to control all of NORAD and the entire response, nuclear response. And the first thing it did after they powered up, it said, there is another. and they're wondering, what the heck is it talking about? And it's figured out through all its communication channels and so on, there was its equivalent over in Russia. And they called the one in Russia was called Guardian. That just happened to be the name of the operating system that Tandem decided to use when they came up with their nonstop computers. So it was pretty much an inside joke for people that knew that movie and how it worked out in the end. Did not work well for the humans. Which is just like the Terminators. A couple things on housekeeping that we want to take care of. Right now, we're not planning on having a December meeting. I think our meeting date will be utilized instead by Southside for that, because their meeting would normally be much closer to Christmas. And for the most part, we don't normally have a December meeting. I will plan to have one next month, however, in November. So in case people are looking for the information, I'll send out a reminder when December comes up that there's not a Northwest meeting at that time. Also, I'm intending on taking the HDMI probably a step further and coming up with another presentation and some additional depth. But any other ideas that you would like me to look at as well that you think that need to be addressed? I had from last time USB-C and new versions. I can look at trying to do something for that.
Yeah, just basically straighten us out as to what all this new renaming of USB is all about.
Okay. Renaming.
Bert's got something there at it.
Yeah.
Can
Okay.
my iPhone be a monitor?
Could your iPhone be a monitor? It already is a monitor.
Well, no, I have my Kangaroo, and it used to talk to my iPhone in previous versions, and then it stopped. So in other words, there was I guess it was a USB 3 cable to the Lightning cable on my previous iPhone, and then something in the Windows side stopped it. But it used to be I could just use a phone as a monitor, and it showed like the Windows screen. I could use a mouse, and you just had that one wire connection from USB 3 to Lightning.
Well, I've never had that particular setup myself. The closest I think I would have ever gotten to like that would be one of the remote control programs. What's one of the ones I'm thinking of?
It also used to work on an iPad the same way.
Well, it sounds like the same person that turned it off on the iPhone also turned it off in the other area as well.
It almost sounds like
It would give you a capability of having the display from one on the other and allow you to scroll the display and handle the different resolutions and be able to expand and read stuff that you couldn't normally read. But I have not tried to utilize that. But I haven't. If the Kangaroo used to work, what does Kangaroo say on their website now if it doesn't work? As they say, it only works with certain devices.
Well, there was a program at the time the Kangaroo was made, but I think that program went out of business, so to speak.
Oh, so they use the Kangaroo hardware for let's see, for iPhone.
Oh, good. Wow.
No, I don't see anything. Use your iPad to control your Kangaroo mobile desktop.
Well,
Is that what it was?
yeah, and it worked on an iPhone or iPad.
Well, it sounds like you had to have a particular OS Linux application on your device. I'm wondering if that's no longer supported and the operating system has moved on and released it and didn't get support, then they're not going to allow additional ones to come in.
Yeah, this was originally, there was a projector that they also made. InFocus made it, made this Kangaroo. And it does have an HDMI, regular HDMI, and goes to a monitor. But you'd like to not always have to have a big monitor with you.
Yeah, if you needed it. Were you typically going into places that had no monitor at all, or you just needed to control?
No, the whole idea was you could have both of these things in your pocket, and you had your whole, and a mouse, and you had everything.
Well, if you didn't upgrade your iPhone, would it still be working?
Well, I think something in the operating system killed it.
Well, I would think
This was a few years ago, so.
Right. Well, I would think as if it was extremely profitable, Apple would have found a way to build it inside their operating system and then make it so nobody else could duplicate it.
Well, I mean, they do sell 7-inch monitors and things like that, but I mean, the fact that you could have your iPhone just be a monitor would be interesting.
Okay, I find the display a little on the small side myself, but yeah.
There is screen mirroring, and there's casting, and there's lonely screen, and there are things like that.
But you couldn't boot up the Kangaroo if it doesn't have a monitor to get booted.
Right.
So you might be able to figure out how to do it as a second screen, but not alone.
Yeah, not as a primary. I have a feeling there might be a Linux way of doing it, but that wouldn't work on an iPhone.
I think I know what your problem is. I think Apple wanted to have an app called Kangaroo, so they preempted anything you have connected called Kangaroo. You can only have one Kangaroo in the store.
Well, again, InFocus did it so you could just have a regular Windows computer. And by the way, it's up to date. It has the current Windows 10 on it. And
Okay.
so, it runs a little hot, but other than that.
Yeah.
There
Yeah,
are newer models since this came out that are Kangaroos.
Yeah, see, that was InFocus Kangaroo Mobile.
Right.
See, that's different than the Kangaroo that's already in the Apple Store. Interesting. I wonder if they contested each other with trademark infringement, and as a result, your interface lost.
Don't know, but when it worked on the iPhone and just be able to carry it in your pocket and have a full Windows computer with you was really handy.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm sorry, I've never tried it, but well, I would think that if you already had it was in focus and you had Kangaroo, you had the monitor. It's your projector.
Right. Exactly. And I still have that too.
Okay. You were saying something, Bob.
who was?
Were you starting to say something and I interrupted you?
Me?
Yeah. Oh, never mind. Okay.
No, I don't think I actually found anything unique. I
Okay.
thought I might have.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All silence. Okay. I don't know who our new person that joined here was, but they're not sharing any video.
Yeah.
Maybe they're
Can we find out who the name is?
just says JSMIT. That's
Yes.
all I know.
Yeah, but we'd have to try and chat with them to get a name. We use it
Yes.
for our records.
Right. Let's see if I can do that. Do you have?
We did have John with us for a while.
Yeah.
If you remember,
Nicolaus.
Nicholas,
Yes, he was here.
we haven't seen him for about 5 years.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised. He did say hi when he first logged on. So obviously he got the meeting message. I didn't get a response. It'd be interesting because I didn't recognize the name, so. All right, I have the existing things. Any other thoughts of other stuff you'd like to see?
I could think of a few, but not particularly computer related. Things I'd like to see, but
The Great Wall before it crumbles, okay?
no,
Yeah,
I've walked the Great Wall
you walked the Great Wall.
with a
It's
sprained ankle. I made the distance.
Yeah, Sanford did put into chat that he'd like to get something more organized about mesh networking.
Okay. All right. Mesh networks discussion.
Maybe this USB-C, because I noticed on my Toyota RAV4 that I just got, it's got several of the USBs. They're USB-C.
Yep.
And I had to get some new cables so I could hook, like my phone to that, because the other ones that I have wouldn't work.
Like I say, everybody's going over to USB-C these days. Chromebooks, for example, they just have 2 USB-C ports and that's it.
Yep. And if you plug your mouse in and then you plug your power in, you can't plug it in another drive.
Well, you can get hubs and mini hubs.
You have to get a hub that passes power, and then you can do stuff. Yeah, you can. But I'm just thinking, okay, you only put 2 connectors on here when I'm sitting here with this old HP that had at least 4, and I don't know if there's ones on the back, but if I plugged it into a dock, I'd have a half dozen more.
Well, you know how much my tower has, don't you? Like about
Oh yeah, you
16,
have all kinds of yes,
like about 16 ports.
Apple
more than you would care. Yeah, what I was really surprised is when I was using a program from Nursoft, it's USB DView,
Yeah.
and it dumps out the history of the USB known device database that's on your computer.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Oh, there's a lot of information that's there. Like, whoa, I can tell you every single flash drive that's ever been plugged in here.
And that should indicate to you why Windows 11 should not be requiring TPM security keys for each and every USB mass storage device.
Yep.
It plugs in, and each time it plugs in.
That's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, but there is a way kind of around it, because on the device you can put in a shim that communicates, but you still need to register it, and there's only so many items that can, so many keys that can be in the list.
Yeah.
On 2-port computers, a lot of the Apple laptops have only 2 ports also.
Yep.
That even goes back to the USB Type A ports, besides the newer C stuff.
Yeah, I can remember some of those. Yeah. But of course, you had other connectors as well. You had the Lightning connector.
Yeah.
So you had an extra high-speed connector that was sitting there. It just was called by a different name.
It was usually that a Thunderbolt type connector.
Yeah.
Thunderbolt meant something else to Apple from what it means to the rest of the world now.
Right.
Yeah.
Now Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4 are fairly standard, and Apple went back to that standard. They're no longer proprietary Thunderbolt.
Yeah.
I mean, my little Nook has Thunderbolt 3. It has 2 of them, in fact. And that's in a device about, twice the height of a pack of playing cards.
Yeah, and you never use both of them at the same time, right?
You probably wouldn't want to, because it will slow them down. But you can. I have an enclosure and a hub.
Now, does the NUC support a direct bandwidth to the Thunderbolt that bypasses the processor?
That I don't know. I think the processor is involved.
Okay, so it's still a processor involved, because if it had its own DMA path to memory, that would make, I could see where it either had to share between the two, or if the processor gets involved, there's only so many processor cycles and it's got to do that and handle interrupts at the same time.
Yeah, there's only so many lanes that you can have to the processor.
Right.
And those lanes must be shared between ports on the same bus.
Correct.
And I think there's only one. Yeah, there's only one bus on a single board computer like that. For probably for all the USB, there's probably only a couple of buses.
Well, I wasn't sure what kind of support chip that they built in with the NUC that supported all of the peripheral interfaces.
I don't know, to be honest. I know that my tower PC does not have Thunderbolt support.
Okay.
It has USB 3.0. I'm talking about the old names. 3.0 and the old name 3.1. And then I found out that my external SSD enclosure is really a USB 3.0 enclosure. That's the connection it makes. And so it's limited to 5 gigabit. 5 gigabits per second.
Not the faster 10.
Yeah, it doesn't do 10. Whereas my hard drives, of course, do 10.
The funny thing
At least theoretically.
The funny thing is, you mentioned in a prior meeting that both of us were in, and I don't think it was Ed's, but at any rate,
yeah,
I took one of my standard USB 3.1 Gen 1 hard drives to a machine that I will eventually have up on 11, I hope by next month. And I swear that little sucker did a full image backup of the drive in probably half the time.
Yeah, on your older device, your older PC, there must have been other things sharing that same bus or those lanes.
Could be.
Whereas here you've got the lanes clear.
Yeah, it didn't let anybody else use the lanes.
Well, it depends on how many you've got.
Yeah, true.
You can have dedicated lanes. There's at least 4 dedicated lanes in an 11th gen Core i5 processor. There's 4 dedicated lanes, and there's 12 that are shared.
By the way, speaking of, you brought up 11th gen. Who out here has got a Ryzen 7000 series processor or the new Intel Generation 13? I just saw that Micro Center just got a hold of the Intel Generation 13. I don't know if anybody's got the 7000 Ryzen's yet.
Yeah, Intel is going over to just calling theirs Intel processors, and they're not going to specify what they are anymore.
Well,
they're not going in for gens or Core I or anything like that, or Atom.
Well, I'm not in line to get any Ryzen Threadripper CPUs in the near future.
Yeah,
well, why not?
Those Ryzen Threadrippers are a little beyond my needs and my pocketbook.
128 lanes, I think.
Well, the Intel, I think it's the i9 13th gen, has 24 cores, and I think the i7 had about half that.
Yeah, well, the thing is, again, in terms of number of cores, the Apple M1 and M2 chips keep talking about how many cores they've got, especially the graphics cores. And they've got a large number of cores, but each core can't do very much.
Right, but
dedicated.
That's just like NVIDIA's graphic cards. You got God knows how many cores in those, especially in the 3000 and the new 4000 series cards, and they are limited to what those cores can do, but they have tremendous computing power on one card.
It depends on what you're trying to process.
Right.
If you are processing a lot of vector graphics, great. If you're transcoding a lot, beautiful. But if you are doing something other than gaming or video editing, it's either useless or it could actually get in your way.
Yeah, to just be a power hog.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at the guys with crypto mining.
Yeah.
And they don't use them anymore as a result.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of governments were shutting them down because of all the power consumption.
Well, it isn't always because of the power consumption.
Well, that's
as you know, crypto has cratered.
Yeah, but I mean,
And there's much less demand now.
Yes, there is.
that-
This may be the answer to the chip shortage.
well, that's true. But the bad part is a lot of those cards are now flooding the market.
Right.
Like Florida's flooded out cars are going to be flooding the market, and you don't always know how to determine whether the card you're buying used was one of those that was used in crypto mining.
Yes, it was only overclocked briefly.
Yeah, right.
Right. Yeah. But
It
anyway,
was only used by a little old lady from Pasadena to play solitaire.
yeah, except that somebody had installed a crypto app onto her PC. And she didn't know it.
And she didn't know it.
That
Why,
can happen to
taken-
anybody.
It's had taken forever to reshuffle that deck.
But I will say the Intel CPU chips that they're now advertising, you're talking, they're talking in terms of 5 to 6 gigahertz speeds on the chip. I wonder how much cooling that takes.
Do you have a tank of liquid nitrogen around?
I was
Well,
thinking more like
it depends on the
nitrogen.
cores. Remember, they always have an Intel processor that's the entry level of the line that might be an 11th or 12th generation, but it only has 2 cores and 4 threads because it's going to go into a laptop and only wants to pull 15 watts.
Right.
Yeah,
And like I say,
it makes
Intel
more
is-
sense on the laptops from a power consumption basis. It starts really competing with the ARM chips, but on the desktop ones, holy mackerel! I mean, I've seen information that some of these high-end.
I just had a
cores-
complete power failure here.
I saw.
Let's see if everything is still working.
Your voices, but
I
you
may have
froze
just
up.
dropped.
Your
Who knows?
image is frozen, but your voice is good.
Yeah,
You froze your image.
it may have frozen more. But some cores are sucking up to at least 150 watts, and power supplies are going in excess of 1,500 watts.
That's a
know
lot
where
of
the-
heat.
Huh?
That's a lot of heat.
What do you mean? How are you going to heat your home this winter?
Oh, well, if you're going to use it that way, yeah, sure. I plug it into one of these. What are these things? They're not called air conditioners anymore. But there are.
Oh,
Did I get me?
yes,
Who
he
got
just
me to host?
boosted you to co-host because he's
Boosted.
knocked out.
Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, we haven't got much of the meeting left to go anyway.
Right.
So if anybody needs disciplining or kicking out, I'll be here to do it.
Well, if nothing else than that, I can get in the Zoom account as far as that goes to make sure it's shut down properly.
Yeah.
Is this being recorded?
I hope so.
We got to get everything
Let's
shut
put it
down
this
correctly,
way.
and
I'm making the attempt, and I hope I got it.
yeah, the meeting and the recording.
Well, the recording is on my end.
Oh, so we're good on that.
So as long as I don't have a power outage too, we're fine. You got to end your videoing at the correct time, otherwise you end up with nothing.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
Oh yeah, it's a real slick trick, Ned. If you don't close down the file properly, you got nothing.
Now, with recording directly from Zoom, when you close the meeting is when it downloads your video.
It depends. There's 2 ways. You can record locally or up in the cloud. Our cloud can only handle one video up there. Somebody has to pull it down and then delete it out of the cloud.
Right.
And that's a pain in the butt. I did it once and it took forever to get it downloaded. And
Yeah,
I've got
it
fairly
is
decent-
a pain. You're not limited to one, by the way. You're limited pretty much to, you get one, I think it's 1 gig.
Yes, it's
but
1 gig.
You can buy more space.
Yes.
And then you can have more than one.
Right, but
right.
generally speaking, our meetings go just slightly more than 500 megabits. Therefore, you can only get one in there. You got more space, but it's not usable unless you got a short meeting.
Yeah,
That's the
so
headache.
protocol is to download and then all that,
Well,
or to do it locally.
yeah, it's better to do it locally because you have the video immediately.
Yeah.
But I use a different. I don't use Zoom's recording anyhow. I use
No.
OBS, and I do
OBS
that
Studio.
locally.
Yeah.
I do OBS also. Good night, everybody.
All right.
Right.
Yeah.